Our Violet Ends, Chapter 41. Celia seemed to have ended up a soldier, pursuing the battleground from above. All she had ever wanted was a quietly revolving world. She had slapped her hands over her ears, hoping that silence in her head meant silence outside too. That would work no longer. The world had grown too loud. The city had come to a crescendo. 3 Scarlets from the north, likely bringing more, Celia reported. Immediately, the girl who had been idling by the balcony and wait for her observations ran off to report. The message would travel from house to house, building to building. "Your note has been handled," an incoming girl reported now, nodding to Celia. "We reached Da now." Celia nodded back, then turned her focus to the streets again. She never thought she would end up a soldier, and she supposed she wasn't. She was not among those gathering below holding bricks and batons and weapons and wait for the gangsters and nationalists. When the first of the fight broke out, the people only needed to resist until the city could awaken, until their numbers could pour outward and could do what they'd always done best: incite chaos, take to the streets, overwhelm all the higher hands trying to control them. "Get ready," Celia called down. On cue, the Scarlets approached, startling upon sighting the workers already waiting outside their apartment blocks. They exchanged a glance as if asking if they should still proceed. When their eyes lifted, sighting Celia from above, a flash of recognition seemed to register. Celia stepped inside from the balcony. Not a soldier, but the watching eyes. Not a soldier, but the beating heart of resistant. Benedict pulled at the bands on his arms, shedding it as soon as he was off the main roads. The strip of white fabric soaked in a dirty rain puddle, and he shuddered, a brief chill skating down his back. They were all wearing it, the Scarlets with their knives and guns, faces smeared with a bit of dirt, as if that disguised them as the masses, their arms band printed with the Chinese character for labor, as if this was the workers' cause firing back upon its leaders. He had wagered that he could blend among them unnoticed, and he had been right. It had been only taken a change of clothes, and hardly any of the Scarlets on the road stopped to consider him, even if he was running in the opposite direction. Benedict paused now, crouching behind a telephone post where he heard a rumble of commotion in the distance. The concessions were open. He didn't know when that had happened, when all the foreign soldiers had been commanded to depart their posts. For whatever reason, Route Gishi was guarded, and the roads, formerly blocked with sandbags and makeshift chain fences, were now cleared. The commotion came nearer. Benedict ducked just in time to hide from the group of Scarlets as they hurried out of the French concession. He shouldn't have been surprised. The Scarlets and Nationalists have come into an agreement with the foreigners then. The foreigners had allowed this, had known about the purge, and warned their people to stay indoors. No matter how much the Nationalists proclaimed their need to retake the country, too much of this city was under the foreigners. Too many Nationalist offices and Nationalist headquarters sat on French land to risk upsetting them. "Hurry up, Jessfield is low on reinforcements." Another group ran past the telephone post, and Benedict sank lower, though the post would surely cover him from view. Only when the voices faded again did he stand, poking his head around to watch the Kuomintang men disappear from sight. The French concession was empty. Benedict had never seen its early morning so vacant. Not a single vendor in sight, even while the sky slowly brightened into a hazy gray. But that didn't mean it was quiet. Sirens were shrieking all across the city, most of them coming from the south. If Benedict took a guess, he would say they were coming from the gunboats, those floating upon the parts of the Hongpu River in Nanshi. He started to run. No use being subtle now. Each second wasted was a second closer to noon. Benedict knew where General Shu's house was located. The only concern was whether Marshall would be there or if the house would be inhabited at all. For all he knew, they were no longer in Shanghai. For all he knew, they were in any location across the city outside from foreign land and far from the fighting. "Hey!" With a start, Benedict turned over his shoulder, finding a group of Scarlets emerging from a narrow side street. They were dressed as he was, rifles in hand. Benedict's first instinct was to run, but the concession was too wide and vast. There would be no way to lose his pursuers, not unless he would disappear into thin air. "What?" Benedict shouted back, as if their call was nothing more than an annoyance. "Where are you going?" one Scarlet within the group bellowed. Command said to congregate in Zai Bay. We've got protesters trying to march on 2nd Division headquarters. Oh? Benedict feigned ignorance. He tried to think if he even knew where the hell the Nationalist 2nd Division headquarters were. Baoshan Road? I was not made aware. I'm running a message. For? They were getting suspicious. Benedict steeled his expression. Lord Kai is having a direct note brought to Chiang Kai-shek. He's already mad enough about Juliet's stunt. Do you want to be the ones to go back and explain why his note is late? The Scarlets all grimaced, some more severely than others. Go on, then, another in the group said. Before Benedict even moved, they were already off in different direction, muttering among themselves about Lord Kai. Benedict exhaled, continuing onward with his pulse, beating a racket in his chest. That had been a risk. For all he knew, Lord Kai might have been publicly announced that what Juliet had done. Fate was on his side this time. His target finally came into view. A tall, wrought iron gate, painted black. It didn't seem like there was anyone standing guard. It didn't seem like there was anyone keeping watch within the compound either. All Benedict could hear were distant sirens. Distant sirens and the whistling sound, whipping through his hair and obscuring his vision. Benedict palmed a gun and slunk around the gate. His boots came down hard on the shrubbery that surrounded the resistance, rustling with every step. The ground inclined slightly uphill here, rising as the trees grew thicker, branches drooping low. In this part of the French concession, the houses were built far apart enough that each had a garden and a long, winding driveway. Some chose enclosures to block people from looking in, while others let their flowers and shrubs be gawped at freely. When Benedict finally found a lump of dirt tall enough to step on, he used his boot to launch himself up on the welded gate, peering over to discover not only one outer enclosure, but a second fence erected just inside. Is this a house or a military compound? He muttered. There seemed to be no movement between the fences. With a grunt, Benedict swung his legs over the first wall, almost rolling right off and narrowly landing on his 2 feet. A twinge of pain shot up his ankle. Please don't be sprained. Please don't be sprained. He took a step forward. The pain worsened. Oh, for crying out loud. Half-hobbling, Benedict grabbed a hold of the second fence, shoving his left foot through one of the notches. This one was chain-linked, rather than a smooth wall. But as soon as he had hauled himself halfway up, he heard noises coming closer. Cursing furiously under his breath, Benedict stuck his right foot into the fence, biting right past his screaming ankle, and scrambled over the sharp wire at the top. It was possible that he had torn a rip through the cuff of his trousers. It was possible he had scratched his arm and was leaving a trail of blood through the grass. None of it mattered enough to slow him down, afraid that he would be spotted at any minute now that he was in, hurrying along the edges of the garden. The house loomed into view. One prominent front door, then 2 wings to either side of it. The second-floor balconies hanging atop its first-floor garages. Gauging by the number of shiny black cars parked outside the house, there were plenty of visitors inside. Benedict paused, trying to figure out his best course of action. If he listened hard, he thought he heard the steady hum of conversation from inside, which meant they were possibly hosting an early morning function. He could hardly comprehend how. The Nationalists had just set the command for slaughter on the city. How did any of these men find the stomach to congregate together and continue with their day when their soldiers are lying waste to the people outside? Marshal, where the hell are you? Benedict whispered to the empty gardens. Carefully hunching close to the ground, he started to make his way around the gravel paths, sticking close to the cover of the trees. Too close to the house, and he feared being spotted through the large windows. Too close to the fence, and he feared being spotted by the patrolling soldiers. It wasn't until he came around the back of the house that he dared straighten a little, hobbling close to the painted white walls. Somehow he needed to find a way in. Perhaps if he stripped out of the overalls, he could pretend to be a Nationalist assistant and claim that... Benedict halted. He had passed a window. Only now he doubled back, peering in more closely. There was a flag hanging over the desk, inside, deep blue with a white sun. This was an office. This was General Shu's office. The 2 window panes were latched, but that was no problem. Benedict retrieved his pocket knife and triggered the thin blade, sliding it right between 2 panes. All he had to do was push up, and the latch was nudged out of the way, the window hinges creaking softly when Benedict nudged at the glass. He almost couldn't believe it. With care not to bring the dirt of the gardens in with him, he climbed through, wincing when he landed on the carpet. The office stayed silent. No alarm going off, no secret guard waiting in the corner, only the flag fluttering with the slightest disturbance. Dust settling over the papers on the desk, in the early sunlight casting a slash between the window. One door opposite the desk likely led into the hallway. Another door near the flag was smaller, a storage unit. Benedict's gaze caught on the desk. He hardly had the time to dawdle, yet he paused all the same, trying not to put more pressure on his ankle as he walked over and picked up 2 pieces of paper left in the center. The first was messily scribbled, its characters almost bleeding off its page in a hurry. "We intercepted this. We sent word to Lord Kai." Benedict blinked, a bad feeling sinking in his stomach. The second piece of paper was far thinner, ink visible enough through the sunlight even before he unfolded it. This message was written in a much more careful hand, addressed to... "Oh no," he muttered. "Da now. Kai Junli and Roma Montagov seek passage with you to leave the city. You must take them on board, both of them, for the good of the country, for the good of the people. Please do this favor. Lang Se-lin." The Nationalists knew. The Scarlets knew. They will be assembling their forces right this moment, intent on stopping Juliet from leaving, and if they caught them, then Roma would be hauled away for execution. Benedict set the papers down. He had to find Marshall. They had to get out, get to the Bund, deliver the warning. But then came the sound of footsteps down the hall. Then came the boom of voices coming closer and closer. They were heading to the office. Panic set his pulse into a breakneck speed. Benedict eyed the window, calculating the time he needed to climb back out. With no time to spare, he pivoted instead for the other door of the office and opened it to find a storage room for filing cabinets, barely wide enough to let one person walk through, but long enough to leave darkness in the other end. He squeezed right in, his back pressed against the cabinets lining the walls, shoulders almost colliding with the sharp metal edges. Click. Benedict pulled the door after himself just as the burst of voices entered the office. They settled into the room, chairs scraping back, heavy bodies sitting down, discussing the communists, discussing the massacre. And then, "We have complaints from the Scarlet Gang about the Montagov kill order. Said it was dishonorable." Benedict wasn't sure if he heard that correctly. He had turned rigid with surprise, listening closer. So the Scarlet Gang hadn't been entirely on board. He didn't know whether to respect them for voicing their concern or hate them for going through with it anyway. With fear coating his skin like sweat, Benedict pushed at the door as carefully as he could, allowing it to open just the barest sliver. He didn't have a perfect idea what each high-ranking official in the Kuomintang looked like, but he recognized General Shu, if not by his resemblance to Marshall, then by the image permanently seared into his head when General Shu was taking Marshall away from him. "Forget it," General Shu said. "My command stands. We will never again have a chance like this for eradicating our enemies. We must take it." Benedict's fists curled by his sides, twisting at his sleeves for something to do, for some way to exert energy, so he didn't move and make noise. Since when were the White Flowers enemies to the Nationalists anyway? Dmitri had allied with the Communists, but that was enough to condemn every White Flower? If it were the Scarlets demanding the White Flowers be pulled into the purge, that was one matter, but General Shu insisting on it instead? There were only 4 Montagovs left in the city, unless the kill order wasn't a strike against the White Flowers at all, but an effort to take everyone Marshall loved away from him. Benedict exhaled slowly. The Nationalists continued with their discussion, the smell of cigarette smoke wafting into the closet space, all the while trying not to move a single muscle. Benedict was trapped.